In a remote fjord in the far north, sheltered by mountains and protected by every defense the Germans could devise, sat the most powerful warship in the German Navy. It was a floating fortress, a battleship of immense size and firepower, and its mere existence was a constant threat that tied down enormous Allied naval resources. As long as it survived, it had to be watched, guarded against, accounted for in every calculation. Sinking it through conventional means seemed nearly impossible, for it was protected by its remote location, by anti-submarine nets, by anti-aircraft defenses, by everything that could be arrayed to keep it safe. And so the Allies turned to one of the most audacious and dangerous schemes of the entire war, an attack carried out not by a great fleet or a squadron of bombers, but by a handful of men crammed into tiny submarines barely large enough to hold them. This is the story of how a few men in midget submarines took on the greatest battleship in the German Navy. This is a story about extraordinary courage in the face of almost impossible odds, about the lengths to which men would go to strike at a target that seemed unreachable, and about the ingenuity that produced a weapon capable of penetrating defenses that nothing else could breach. It is a story about a handful of brave men operating in tiny craft, undertaking a mission of almost unimaginable danger, and accomplishing what great fleets and bomber squadrons could not. And it is a story about the unconventional thinking that, when conventional means fail, finds a new and daring way to achieve the impossible. To understand the significance of this attack, you have to understand the problem that the great battleship posed. This was one of the most powerful warships in the world, a vessel of enormous size, heavily armored, and armed with guns capable of devastating firepower. Its very existence was a strategic threat of the first order. As long as it remained operational, it posed a danger to Allied shipping and naval operations, a threat that could not be ignored. The Allies had to keep substantial naval forces ready to counter it, to guard against the possibility that it might break out and wreak havoc. The battleship tied down these resources simply by existing, a constant drain on Allied strength. The Allies were therefore desperate to eliminate this threat, to sink or disable the great battleship, and free themselves from the burden of countering it. But this was far easier said than done. The battleship was sheltered in a remote fjord, protected by its distance from Allied bases and by the difficult geography that surrounded it. It was guarded by anti-submarine nets that blocked the approach of conventional submarines. It was defended by anti-aircraft guns that threatened any air attack. It was, in short, protected by a formidable array of defenses that made conventional attack extraordinarily difficult. Attempt after attempt to deal with the battleship faced these daunting obstacles. It was in the face of this challenge that the idea of using midget submarines was conceived. If conventional submarines could not penetrate the defenses, perhaps tiny submarines, small enough to slip through or under the obstacles, might succeed where larger craft could not. These midget submarines were tiny vessels, crewed by just a few men, designed for exactly this kind of special operation. They could potentially navigate into the protected fjord, slip past the defenses, and approach the battleship closely enough to attack it. It was a daring concept, relying on the small size and stealth of these craft to accomplish what conventional forces could not. Now, we should be honest about the history here, because the midget submarine attack on the German battleship is a real and well-documented event, and it deserves to be told with accuracy and respect for the extraordinary courage of the men involved. What follows is grounded in the genuine historical record of this operation, though we will tell it as a narrative to convey its full drama and danger. The core is true. Midget submarines really were used in a daring attack on a major German battleship sheltered in a Norwegian fjord, and this attack really did succeed in damaging the battleship, putting it out of action for a significant period. The details are recounted to convey the magnitude of the achievement and the courage it required. The midget submarines used in this operation were remarkable. Craft, tiny vessels that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in submarine warfare. They were extremely small, crewed by only a handful of men who operated in cramped, dangerous conditions. These men had to navigate their tiny craft over a considerable distance to reach the target, then penetrate the defenses of the fjord, slip past the anti-submarine nets and other obstacles, and approach the battleship closely enough to deliver their attack. The plan was for the midget submarines to place explosive charges beneath the battleship, charges that would detonate and cause severe damage to the great vessel. The conditions these men endured were extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. The midget submarines were cramped and uncomfortable, demanding much of the men who crewed them. The journey to the target was long and perilous, fraught with the dangers of navigation and the constant risk of detection or mechanical failure. And the attack itself, penetrating the defended fjord and approaching the battleship, was a mission of almost unimaginable danger. The men knew that they faced enormous risks, that the chances of returning safely were far from certain, that they were undertaking one of the most dangerous operations imaginable. And yet they went forward, driven by their determination to strike at the great battleship. The penetration of the fjord's defenses was a critical and harrowing phase of the operation. The midget submarines had to navigate past the anti-submarine nets and other obstacles that protected the battleship, slipping through or under these defenses without being detected. This required extraordinary skill, nerve, and a measure of luck. A single mistake, a single moment of detection, could mean disaster. The men had to operate their tiny craft with precision and care, navigating the dangerous waters of the fjord, evading the defenses, working their way toward the battleship. It was a feat of seamanship and courage of the highest order. Reaching the battleship, the crews of the midget submarines carried out their attack, placing explosive charges beneath the great vessel. This was the culmination of their dangerous mission, the moment toward which all their efforts had been directed. Working beneath the battleship, in the most dangerous of circumstances, they positioned their charges to inflict maximum damage. And then they had to attempt to escape, to withdraw from the fjord before the charges detonated, though the dangers of the operation meant that escape was far from assured. The attack was carried out with courage and determination, despite the enormous risks involved, and the attack succeeded in its essential purpose. The explosive charges detonated, causing significant damage to the great battleship. The mighty vessel, which had seemed almost invulnerable, which had been protected by every defense the Germans could devise, was seriously damaged by the daring attack of the midget submarines. The damage was severe enough to put the battleship out of action for a significant period, neutralizing the threat it posed and freeing the Allies, at least for a time, from the burden of countering it. A handful of men in tiny submarines had accomplished what great fleets and bomber squadrons had been unable to achieve. The cost of this success was high, as such dangerous operations often were. The mission was extraordinarily perilous, and not all of the brave men who undertook it survived or escaped capture. The dangers of the operation, the difficulty of penetrating the defenses and escaping afterward, exacted a price. But the men who carried out this attack, whatever their individual fates, accomplished something remarkable, striking a significant blow against the German Navy and demonstrating extraordinary courage in the process. Their sacrifice and their achievement deserve to be remembered and honored. The significance of this attack extended beyond the immediate damage to the battleship. By disabling the great vessel, the Allies removed, at least temporarily, a major strategic threat, freeing naval resources that had been tied down countering it. The attack also demonstrated the effectiveness of unconventional methods, of the use of special craft and daring operations to accomplish what conventional forces could not. It showed that even the most heavily defended target could be vulnerable to a sufficiently audacious and well-executed attack. The midget submarine attack stood as a testament to the value of ingenuity and courage in overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. There is a profound lesson here about finding unconventional solutions to difficult problems. The great battleship had seemed nearly invulnerable to conventional attack, protected by defenses that thwarted submarines and aircraft alike. But by thinking unconventionally, by developing a new kind of weapon and a new approach, the Allies found a way to strike at this seemingly unreachable target. This illustrates the value of creative thinking, of the willingness to try new and unconventional approaches when conventional methods fail. When faced with a problem that seems impossible to solve through ordinary means, the solution may lie in thinking differently, in finding a new and unexpected approach. Consider, too, the extraordinary courage of the men who crewed these midget submarines. They undertook a mission of almost unimaginable danger, crammed into tiny craft, navigating perilous waters, penetrating formidable defenses, all to attack one of the most powerful warships in the world. They knew the risks, knew that their chances of returning safely were uncertain, and yet they went forward. This kind of courage, this willingness to undertake an extraordinarily dangerous mission for the sake of an important objective, represents the very best of human bravery. The men who attacked the great battleship in their midget submarines were heroes in the truest sense, and their courage deserves to be remembered. It is worth reflecting on the ingenuity that produced the midget submarines and the operation that employed them. The development of these tiny craft, designed specifically to penetrate defenses that conventional submarines could not breach, represented a remarkable feat of engineering and tactical thinking. The conception of the operation, the planning that went into it, the recognition that such an unconventional approach might succeed where conventional methods had failed, all reflected a creative and innovative approach to the challenge posed by the great battleship. This ingenuity, combined with the courage of the men who carried out the operation, was what made the attack possible. The story of the midget submarine attack also illustrates the broader principle that even the most powerful and well-protected assets can have vulnerabilities. The great battleship was one of the most powerful warships in the world, protected by formidable defenses, and yet it proved vulnerable to a sufficiently daring and well-executed attack. This is a reminder that no asset, however powerful, is entirely invulnerable, that there is often a way to strike at even the most heavily defended target if one is willing to think creatively and act boldly. The midget submarine attack found and exploited the vulnerability of a target that had seemed almost untouchable. The attack stands as one of the most daring and remarkable special operations of the entire war, a testament to the courage and ingenuity of those who conceived and carried it out. It demonstrated that a handful of brave men, equipped with the right tools and driven by sufficient determination, could accomplish what great fleets and bomber squadrons could not. It struck a significant blow against the German Navy, removing a major strategic threat, and it stands as an enduring example of the power of unconventional thinking and extraordinary courage to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. By the end of the war, the midget submarine attack on the great German battleship had taken its place among the most celebrated special operations of the conflict, a story of audacity and courage that continues to inspire admiration. The attack had accomplished something remarkable, damaging one of the most powerful warships in the world through the daring of a few men in tiny submarines. It stood as a testament to the value of ingenuity, the power of unconventional approaches, and the extraordinary courage of the men who undertook one of the most dangerous missions imaginable. So remember the midget submarines and the brave men who crewed them, the handful of sailors who took on the greatest battleship in the German Navy. Remember the obstacles they faced, the remote fjord, the formidable defenses, the anti-submarine nets, the enormous danger of their mission. Remember how they slipped past the defenses in their tiny craft, placed their charges beneath the great battleship, and succeeded in damaging the mighty vessel that had seemed almost invulnerable. And remember what their achievement reveals: the power of unconventional thinking to overcome impossible challenges, the vulnerability of even the most powerful assets to a sufficiently daring attack, and the extraordinary courage of a few brave men who accomplished what great fleets could not.